Hello everyone, and welcome back to our video series. Today we're going to be going over natural solutions to achieving your best weight through optimized intestinal health. And what I'm going to promise you is that I'm going to give you 3 secrets to optimizing your weight without having to diet, okay? So if you give me just a moment, we're going to get started. So what I'll tell you is, first of all, I'll introduce myself. If you don't know me, my name is Dr. Sandra Bevacqua. I'm a PhD in molecular and cellular biology. And what I want to do is to bring some of the more current research to you as to why it is we've been having such a hard time with our weight. And I'll give you the 3 secrets, and I'll give up the first one right now, and that is probiotics are very, very important for our weight loss. And I'll tell you that since the beginning of this video series, I've been talking to you about the intestinal microbiota and how amazingly important it is for our health. The first video was all about how our immune system is powered by the microbiota. And in the second video, we visited how the intestinal microbiota actually acts as the master endocrine gland of our body. It's controlling most, if not all, of our hormones. And so the species and diversity of the bacteria that live in our bodies, I mean, these bacteria are responsible for our overall health, our organ function, even our personalities. So, I mean, all this is really quite startling. And also, did you know that who is living inside can actually control our weight? There's an increasing number of studies now that strongly suggest that certain probiotics can help you to lose or gain weight. And you know what science is telling us now is that a balanced gut is tied to better health in many, many different arenas, and that a number of digestive issues are tied not only to imbalance of the gut flora, but by specific types of bacteria and fungi that are growing at unusually high or low levels. Sometimes in this office, we'll run something called a comprehensive stool analysis. I've mentioned it to you before. And we do find that, you know, occasionally we do run into parasites, especially in someone that has a history of being quite slender for many years, you know, persistently. But I can tell you that parasites are not as common as dysbiosis, and what that means is an imbalance of gut bacteria. So anyone who's having problems with their weight, whether it's too high or too low for their body, is also having trouble with their intestinal flora and should consider having their healthcare provider run a comprehensive stool analysis. By the way, this is not a test that is run in a hospital. The hospitals will test for parasites, some of the more common parasites or bacterial pathogens like Salmonella, E. coli. They might look for an amoeba, but they're very rarely looking for a long line of bad guys. They're just looking for a couple of things that are common. When you do a comprehensive stool analysis, they'll be looking for over 7,000 species as opposed to the 3 or 4 that might be tested in the hospital. So they can't be compared. And I want you to understand too that when the balance of a person's flora is disturbed, the bad bacteria get a foothold and can spiral out of control. Okay, and that can lead to a wide variety of digestive issues, and that's what people are experiencing today. So weight loss or weight gain is definitely a part of that scene. Right now, most people are flying blind. when they're dealing with weight issues and the digestive issues associated with weight. And their healthcare providers are in the dark as well because there's so many different things going on. So I hope to shed some light on this as we go along in this talk. So the microbiome refers to the bacteria that are living inside of us, and they live in a house. We're going to call that house biofilm. And all of this exists on the inside surfaces of your intestines. And here I'm giving you some of the images that we have of the biofilm that our microbiota live in. The microbiome I've been introducing you to in this video series can be thought of as an essential multicellular organ. It's acting as our master endocrine gland. It's a highly organized structure, and it's made up of a mass of bacteria and fungus living in a house that it builds cooperatively. So the different species are building this house, and what they're using is the proteins, minerals, carbohydrates, the fibers that you eat to be able to build this. The microbiome acts like an ancient brain. It's a brain controlling organ, and it's a brain itself. It's controlling most, if not all, of our signaling systems, such as the immune system, the hormones, the neurotransmitters, which we'll talk about next time. And the intelligence of this organ exists in the cell-to-cell communication that's happening through direct contact, cell to cell, and also through distant communication that's happening by way of little tiny signal molecules. It's kind of like their own little hormones that they're producing, that they're sending to each other, and sometimes by way of little tiny microtubules that some of the colonies will grow from one species to another, and they send little directed signals to each other. We still don't know what they're saying though. Let's see. So what I'll tell you in general is what you put in your mouth has everything to do with who gets to live in your intestines. And when your weight goes high or low, that's a sign that your microbiome is in trouble. So I'm going to give you a quote by the famous Dr. Bruce Lipton. He says, cells read their environment. They assess the information and then select appropriate behavioral programs to maintain their survival. The fact that data is integrated, processed, and used to make a calculated behavioral response emphasizes the existence of something like a brain equivalent in the cell. So he asks, where is the cell's brain? The answer is to be found in bacteria, the most primitive organisms on Earth. The many processes and functions of this unicellular life form are highly integrated. Consequently, it must have a brain equivalent. Cytologically, these organisms do not contain any organelles. They don't have nuclei, they don't have mitochondria, Golgi bodies, any of those good things, the endoplasmic reticulum, they don't have any of that. The only organized structure in these primitive life forms is its cell membrane. And the cell membrane, once thought to be like a permeable saran wrap that holds the cell together, that holds the cytoplasm together, actually provides for the bacteria digestive function. It provides for their respiration, their excretory, and their kind of skin systems. It also serves as the cell's brain. So these are the thoughts of Dr. Bruce Lipton, and if you haven't read any of Dr. Lipton's work, I will strongly suggest that you look him up. He's amazing. So if you're healthy, there are about 160 different microorganisms in your digestive system and over 1,100 species shared amongst all of the individuals in your community. And the majority of these bacteria are friendly. The friendly bacteria produce several important nutrients, including vitamin K and some of your B vitamins. However, there are pathogens that live in the gut in tiny quantities that actually are a part of our health and well-being. There's been laboratories in Japan measuring the magnetic resonance of our, that comes from our bodies and our probiotics. And what they're doing is looking at magnetic resonance and comparing it to other places that magnetic resonance can happen. And so what we have then is what they're looking at is kind of wavelengths of resonance. In the human microbiome, if you don't have some of the bad guys there, the pathogens, in tiny quantities, we don't have that magnetic resonance that we associate with good health. And it turns out that the same magnetic resonance is what you find in springs, natural springs that come from the earth. So if you go to a natural spring where water is coming out of the earth, you'll find the same resonance there. So there's something about that. And if the pathogens are not present in our bodies, we don't have that. So as we've discussed earlier in this series, probiotics help to break down complex fiber, and they turn it into beneficial short-chain fatty acids, which we talked about in short. And if you have a comprehensive stool analysis, all those short-chain fatty acids are measured for. So we know exactly which ones you're producing and if you have enough of them. There are two main families of good bacteria in the gut. They're called Bacteroides and Firmicutes. And the body weight seems to be related to the balance of these two families of bacteria. So both in human and animal studies, we now know that normal weight individuals have very different gut bacteria than overweight or obese people. In those studies, individuals with obesity had more Firmicutes and fewer Bacteroides compared to normal weight people. So the more Bacteroides, the more slender a person is. There are also some studies showing that when gut bacteria from obese mice are transplanted into the guts of lean mice, the lean mice get fat. And I'll show you this study in just a minute. But all of the studies suggest that gut bacteria may play the most powerful role in weight reduction. Not all studies have found that probiotics help with weight loss. In fact, research has shown us that Lactobacillus acidophilus supplementation alone results in significant weight gain. And the results of these studies were also associated with weight gain in animal studies. Now, the Lactobacillus fermentin and Lactobacillus ingluvii were also associated with weight gain in animal studies. On the other hand, Lactobacillus plantarum was associated with weight loss in animals, and Lactobacillus gasseri was associated with weight loss in both obese humans and in obese animals. But the main point I want to get across to you here is that bacterial diversity is associated with better digestion, nutrient absorption, and healthy weight in all species tested. So even though there's specific species that are doing things, it's the diversity that's creating the overall health. Okay, so that point can't be passed by. So I don't want you to get seriously focused on any one particular species. That is not the right way to go. What we want to do is do wide spectrum, many species. Of all of the probiotic bacteria studied, the Lactobacillus gasseri definitely showed the most promising effects on weight loss. So numerous animal studies have found that it clearly has anti-obesity effects. And by the way, I've collected quite a few citations. So those of you that are really interested in learning more about this, I do have a list of citations if you're into reading science. But I'll tell you that there's quite a number of animal studies that are showing the anti-obesity effects, but recently studies in obese Japanese adults have shown impressive results. One of those studies showed that they followed 210 people with a lot of belly fat. Okay, they were selected, and they found that taking Lactobacillus caseri alone for 12 weeks not only reduced body weight, but also decreased fat around the organs, their waist size, their hip circumference, and the body mass index. What's even more impressive is that the belly fat was reduced by 8.5%. However, that being said, when the participants stopped taking the probiotic, they gained back all of the belly fat within a month. So this might have to do with the fact that the diversity to maintain flora stability had been ignored in the study. We need a lot of these. It's like there's 160 places on a team, and all of those team members need to be there for the team to work properly. And if you start replacing just one bacteria, you probably don't have a good team going. Okay, you can't play the game with just one team member. Now remember, the research that I'm showing you is just the very beginning. Weight loss and weight gain using probiotics is a hot topic in research right now, and the picture is going to become clearer over time. I have to show you this study here. This was the research from the laboratory of Dr. Jeffrey Gordon. His laboratory published in Nature over 10 years ago, and he showed us that the microbiome from obese mice has an increased capacity to harvest energy from the diet. And what they proved is that the trait is transmissible by doing fecal implants from obese mice to a mouse that was completely wiped of all bacteria, okay? What they did was the obese microbiota resulted in significantly greater increase in total body fat than in mice that were colonized with lean microbiota. So Dr. Gordon's lab shocked everyone with this research, and the race was on to figure out what's going on. So let's see. Okay. Oh, here is the study. This is the study that I would send you to. It was published in Nature, and now you have the citation for that one. Very important paper. So it's thought that certain probiotics may inhibit the absorption of dietary fat and increase the amount of fat excreted with each bowel movement. In other words, they make you harvest fewer calories from the foods in your diet. And but probiotics might fight obesity in other ways. Some species might help release the appetite-reducing hormone called GLP-1. Increased levels of this hormone may help you to burn calories and burn more fat. So some probiotics may actually work to increase the levels of the protein called ANGPTL4. They could give it a different name. But this hormone may be important for decreasing fat storage in the body. There's also a lot of evidence that obesity is linked to inflammation in the brain. And we'll talk a little bit more about inflammation in a sec, but it's important to keep in mind that these mechanisms aren't really very well understood yet. More research is needed and is underway right now. But I'll tell you that the bottom line is probiotics may adjust the number of calories you absorb from food while increasing the nutrition absorbed. That's the overall general effect. They also affect hormones and proteins related to appetite and fat storage. They also work to reduce the kind of inflammation that can drive away obesity, while at the same time helping the underweight person gain those needed pounds. So studies have found that certain strains of the Lactobacillus family can help you to lose weight and belly fat. And in one study, eating yogurt with Lactobacillus fermentum or Lactobacillus amylovorus reduced body fat by 3 to 4% over a 6-week period. Another study of 125 overweight dieters investigated the effects of Lactobacillus rhamnosus supplements on weight loss and weight maintenance. And this was a 3-month study period, and during the time, the women taking the probiotics lost 50% more weight compared to the group taking a placebo. They also continued to lose weight during the weight maintenance phase of the study. And then we have another study with Lactobacillus gasseri. All of the probiotic bacteria studied, of all of the bacteria studied, as of right now, I'm going to say Lactobacillus gasseri shows the most promising effects on weight loss, as I mentioned before. I talked to you a little bit about this. There's no question about the fact that there are species in the Lactobacillus family that have been shown to reduce weight and belly fat. More of this data is going to be coming out, but I will say that the Lactobacillus gasseri appears to be the most effective, but my guess is that it's going to need the support of a proper family, a proper team around it. So let's talk a little bit about gut inflammation. I run into lots and lots of people that are dealing with this problem. So what I did was I put together a short list of those species that have been shown to successfully address inflammation. I'm going to highlight Bifidobacterium lactis. It's down there on the bottom. It's a very powerful probiotic bacteria, and scientific studies have proven that, that B. lactis strongly enhances immunity. It actually fights tumor growth. It improves digestion and can on its own lower blood levels of cholesterol. In a healthy person, B. lactis inhabits the intestines and the colon in great numbers. Generally, its job is to break down body waste and aid in the absorption of various vitamins and minerals. Bifidobacterium lactis is always present in raw milk and is often used as a starter culture for cheese and buttermilk. Research is telling us that, that to successfully address chronic gut inflammation, it may be necessary to temporarily decrease the gut diversity. This is exactly what happens when we do a biofilm turnover here at WISH. So biofilm turnover is a procedure that has been developed and refined by myself and several other scientists to gently replace an unhealthy, thickened biofilm with a new, thinner, and healthier biofilm and microbiota. And so what we do is we use proteolytic and plant enzymes that are taken by mouth, and we will replace the good bacteria at the same time. And we're basically taking away the old microbiota and placing the new one over a period of weeks or a couple of months. If someone has special situations like gut inflammation, immune system issues, hormone imbalance, their problems can be addressed during the procedure. So that is something that can happen. This is something that happens at home. You're going to be doing, this is an at-home program. There are certain species that are really good at restarting the biofilm. They're kind of like the pioneers that come and start the growth. They're the ones that are putting the foundation down so the other guys can all grow. And it's kind of like in the intestines of a newborn baby. Some of those species, and sometimes we do use the kind of species that you would use for a newborn baby, depending on the situation. And then we're going to employ a very wide spectrum of the major species of good bacteria to help that person get healthy again. And a list of probiotics along with appropriate prebiotics, and we'll talk about that in a sec, and food for each person is always developed for those with inflammatory conditions because they can have great sensitivities to certain foods and such. And the list I gave you on this slide is based on quite a lot of repeated research studies showing that these species have quite a number of beneficial effects, including the inhibition of bacterial translocation, the release of antibacterial chemicals that target the disease-causing pathogenic species, and the production of short-chain fatty acids like lactic acid and butyric acid. And they're also producing antioxidant effects in the body. So what happens is these bacteria are actually healing the entire surface or epithelial barrier of the gut and improving immune cell responses. And over time, these species can help with food allergies as well. And we'll talk about leaky gut in just a second. Here's another very early study that's showing the crosstalk between a new star on the scene, Akkermansia muciniphila. This bacterium is talking to the intestinal lining, and it seems to have some kind of way of controlling diet-induced obesity by controlling how quickly a person gains weight. It improves all of the markers of insulin resistance, it improves metabolic syndrome, it decreases inflammation, and causes a thinning of the intestinal biofilm. So the data is still early. There's not a lot of work out on this particular species, but it might deserve to be added to our growing list very soon. So the digestive system as a whole protects us against disease. And that is something that needs to be understood because we have bacteria and other harmful substances can be defended against by not just our gut bacteria, but everything that's happening. So you put the food in your mouth and you chew it up and it mixes with saliva, and then goes into our stomach, and we have stomach acid that churns and churns and breaks down that food, and then it goes down into the small intestines, and bile salts are sent in, and there's fluids that actually come from the pancreas, and enzymes and such. All of the chemistry of the digestive system, all of it contributes to healthy populations of flora. So if there's problems going on, and I'm going to point a finger at proton pump inhibitors, medications that you can take that will stop your body from producing stomach acid. If that's happening, then it's deeply affecting who can grow in that person's body. And that is decreasing diversity and having an overall negative effect on our health. There are people that can't produce saliva. There are people that have lots of mucus. All of these are signs that something needs to be done, okay? So secret number 2, you've got your good bugs. Now you have to feed them. This is like you get a pet and you have to give it pet food. And fiber is the food for the microbiome, okay? We need, in order to feed all these different bugs, we need a wide variety of fiber types. And those wide variety of fiber types are going to feed a wide diversity of friendly flora. And the first place we're going to get the fiber from is our diet. And it turns out that certain types of fiber are not only great for growing a healthy biome, it's essential for the local detoxification of the endotoxins. You remember in the first video, we talked about that, the endotoxins that are produced by the normal and the pathogenic or bad guys, the gram-negative bacteria that are living inside of us. So fiber is so important. And also the fiber is what breaks down into the short-chain fatty acids that are the molecules that are controlling our hormones. So we talked about that in our the second series, the last one, in the second video. We saw that these are very, very important for our for the signaling to all the organs as well. So here's a great website down there on the bottom that can give you lists of high fiber foods. You see quite a number of them here on this slide. I want to encourage you to go after really, every time you eat, you want fiber, okay? Look and see, where is my fiber source? What food is my fiber source? And I wanted to, I'm not going to take you deep into the science of fiber breakdown and what's going to happen, because it is super complicated. But what I will tell you is, when you're eating, the gut microbiota contributes to our digestion, our metabolism, and our energy production. And these events influences the development of metabolic disorders such as obesity and diabetes. The short chain fatty acids, and they are acetate, butyrate, propionate, valurate, they are being produced by gut microbial fermentation of the fiber. So we're breaking down the fiber and producing these signals. And that's essential for the signaling to every other part of our body, including our brain. And we're going to be talking about that next time. We're going to be talking about the production of neurotransmitters. So this is where the signals are coming from. And it turns out that the fermentation products from fiber determines which one of our genes is getting turned on and which one's getting turned off. So we know that just by changing the diet, we can actually change what genes, what genetics are actually affecting us. We can turn on genes for disease, or we can turn them off just by what we put in our mouth. And we know now that the signaling for the genes is actually coming from the breakdown of fiber. Isn't that cool? So, eat fiber. You know what? I made a list of a lot of different papers, but I felt like I needed to include this one because it's a very interesting story. It turns out that the rates of colon cancer are much higher in African Americans than in rural South Africans. With similar blood genetics, with similar genetics. And the higher rates are associated with a diet higher in animal fat and animal protein and much lower in fiber. And here, in this paper, what they investigated was the further role of fat and fiber. What they did was they arranged to do a food exchange in healthy middle-aged volunteers for 2 weeks. What they did was the African-American volunteers, the African-Americans were fed a high fiber, low fat, African-style diet. And the rural Africans were fed the high fiber, or high fat, high protein, low fiber, American, Western style diet. And they did this under very close supervision for 2 weeks. They got to go on vacation. And so in comparison to their usual diets, the food changes caused a major change and a remarkable reciprocal changes in the blood markers of cancer. So the markers that show that you're more likely to get cancer, so the risk of cancer switched between the two groups. And I thought that this is a very, very interesting study and very telling. I'm not sure about whether the fat was a problem, but in light of the other research, it looks like it's the fiber. It's actually the fiber content and the diversity of the sources of fiber that made all the difference in the world. So here's some foods that cause inflammation. Take a look and see if you can find high fiber food. And we know that inflammation is associated with, gut disorders and with obesity. We know that inflammation that happens in the brain is associated with obesity. So sugar, fats, the fatty meats, okay, but especially corn-fed. Corn-fed meat is inflammatory. The animals that eat the corn get fat, and the people that eat the animals get fat. All right, corn-fed fish. And it, it might have something to do with the whole GMO thing. Nobody really knows that yet. But we know that the GMO foods are problematic, and more foods are being produced with GMO. So simple carbohydrate foods, we know that they were a problem because they are growing. It just turns out that a lot of the pathogens love to eat these foods, alcohol and such. So here are another list of the irritants. And so now we have 6 healthy benefits of prebiotics. And the prebiotics are another way of bringing fiber into your diet. And a lot of research has been done on prebiotics. They are fibers, but they can be taken into the body in a very simple form. You can get prebiotics. They exist as a fiber or like a powder. It often has a little bit of a sweet taste. It's very easy to get into the body. And we know that there's many health benefits from prebiotics. They help us by strengthening our immune system. And this is just research on prebiotics. They strengthen immune system, increase proper fat metabolism, they increase mineral absorption, they normalize bowel movement consistency and frequency, especially in those with an irritable colon or an inflammatory issue. They prevent and alleviate lactose intolerance. They prevent and alleviate complaints caused by gut inflammation. They protect our intestines from GI cancers by reducing cancer-causing enzymes and other carcinogenic molecules that can accumulate in the gut. They prevent and alleviate allergies and skin issues in children and infants. And they prevent respiratory tract infections like colds and flus, that's been shown. They improve mouth flora. And mother's milk, just in case you were wondering whether prebiotics are good for infants, mother's milk contains a prebiotic called galacto-oligosaccharide fiber, which acts as a prebiotic for the breastfed baby. So we all need fiber. And if a prebiotic, if you start on a prebiotic and it causes bloating or gassiness, then it probably is not the right one for you. You're going to be needing to do some other things before that would work, or it might be feeding a bacterium or fungus that you don't want to feed, okay? So there might be other issues. Just wanted to give you a caution there. So there are tons of research going on, and I just wanted to point out this particular research is showing that whole grain fiber and fruits and vegetable intake can have positive effects on the metabolic health by lowering every single marker of inflammation. However, the different markers of inflammation were reduced on each of the different diets, which tells us that the anti-inflammatory effects of fiber and the prebiotics were facilitated by very different mechanisms. The anti-inflammatory effects were not related to changes in gut microbiota composition during the experiment, but were more correlated with the microbiota composition at baseline. And what that means is that the response that happened depended more on where you started than on the changes that happened during the study. It's definitely complicated, okay, and it's being worked out. So here is the study that I just brought you data from. It's really cool study if you want to read more about it. And if you are a person that really loves to have a diet, there is data now supporting these two diets that I'm talking to you about, the paleo diet and the Mediterranean diet. And this paper that's here is a citation showing that the Mediterranean diet is associated with producing a pattern of microbiota that's very healthy. So not all molecules or let me see, not all molecules in our food have the same effect. And while we're talking a little bit about taking care of inflammation and such, I wanted to raise the point about lectins, and we talked a little bit about gliadins and casein last time, but an often forgotten detrimental food protein is the lectin or agglutinin, which is a natural binder, and it's very prevalent in beans and legumes. And so when lectin binds to tissue, it can cause an autoimmune reactivity against that tissue. Of the food groups in the studies that have been done, lectin and agglutinin reactivity had the most pronounced tissue antibody production than any other offenders. So when people have this issue, it's more severe than with other issues. Even as bad as gluten can be, a lectin sensitivity is even worse. And lectins and agglutinins are present in a variety of plants. If you tried to get all of it out of your diet, you would probably not be eating much. But it's the legumes that have the most of it in there. So eliminating it completely from your diet might not be advisable, and it may not be necessary. But taking in large amounts it could be a problem. And some people really, really do better when they take the beans out of their diet. You know, lectins are present in quite a variety of plants because they serve as a defense mechanism against other plants and fungi. And because of their ability to bind virtually to all cell types, they can cause damage to several organs at one time. So you're more likely with lectins to run into an autoimmune disease. However, as we talked about last time, gliadin or gluten and casein in milk are also offenders, and they can have an effect on quite a number of organs as well, especially the thyroid. So when the integrity of the gut is compromised, it can lead to a leaky gut, which means that the body is no longer protected against invaders. You know, the invaders can get into the body, and the invaders might be undigested food, the lectins, gluten, as we talked about before, the casein, bad bacteria, and they can pass through holes in the gut lining. An autoimmune, a leaky gut is going to give rise to food intolerances, which can eventually lead to an autoimmune conditions and a long list of other problems. A few examples of the problems that have been proven to be caused by a leaky gut are MS or multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, eczema, arthritis, migraine headaches, psoriasis, depression, food allergies, and multiple chemical sensitivities. So those are the ones that have been shown to be associated with leaky gut. But leaky gut might be much more prevalent than we ever thought and may be responsible for a long list of ailments. It might be involved whenever the immune system has become weakened or the hormones or neurotransmitters have gone out of balance. Leaky gut can also be associated with cardiovascular disease, and the data to that is coming out fast and furious right now. In the first video, I had mentioned Dr. Donald Kirby, MD. He's a gastroenterologist and director for the Center of Human Nutrition at Cleveland Clinic. And he's been quoted as saying, from an MD standpoint, leaky gut is a very gray area. Physicians don't know enough about the gut, which is our biggest immune system organ. And he's right. Leaky gut syndrome isn't a diagnosis. And it's not even a diagnosis taught in medical school. Instead, to a classically trained healthcare provider, leaky gut really means you've got a diagnosis that hasn't been made yet, or something like that. I have to tell you that I go to these gastroenterology meetings on a regular basis, the conferences, and the research has been coming out and changing everybody's understanding of the human body so fast, it's dumping everyone on their heads. And oftentimes by the end of these meetings, the poor gastroenterologists are walking around with their hands on their head saying, you know, I'm going back to work on Monday morning and everything I'm doing is wrong. I go, wow, what do I do now? So it's stunning how quickly the whole field is changing. But I want to introduce you to the concept of the 4 R's. That means remove, replace, re-inoculate, and repair. And what that is the method by which a gut that's leaky, that's gotten damaged, can be repaired. You remove the old biofilm. This is what I was talking about before. Very gently take away the biofilm, and we have a way of doing this. We use very gentle proteolytic and plant enzymes, and we replace with the good bacteria. We replace with the good molecules that need to be there. We start bringing in the fibers that are needed to build a new biofilm and bring in the foods that need to be available to do that. We re-inoculate with the right bacteria for a healthy person of that age. And if repair is needed, and it probably is, we're going to be using different components to cause that repair. And there's quite a number of molecules, amino acids, herbs that can be used that are really effective and amazingly soothing. So that is what happens for someone that needs to have repair. I wanted to make sure that everybody understands how to develop really, really great bowel movements. And the way that you do that is 5-fold. It's through hydration, taking in enough fiber, which we talked about, oils, moving the body, getting good peristalsis in the gut, and making sure you're getting the right probiotics for you. I have a booklet that I'm going to make available to everybody that's come on to this these talks live. And after the last one, you will receive that book, and it's going to teach you the 5 easy, simple steps to be able to create wonderful bowel movement. So, step number 1, the secret number 1 was probiotics. Secret number 2 is fiber, either with the foods, prebiotics, or both. Secret number 3 is intermittent fasting. And so please don't panic. I know that some people freak out when we talk about fasting, but intermittent fasting only means that you extend the time between meals a little bit. I promise you that in a very short period of time, intermittent fasting will become your friend. And I'm going to show you how it's done. So here are the steps for intermittent fasting. What you do is you note, and this can be done for people that are low weight or high weight, okay? Note the feeling of hunger. Then drink water. If you're really thirsty, you might want to drink a goodly amount of water. Fill your belly, but at least a cup of water, 8 ounces. Add a natural source of B vitamins if you're starving. If it comes on hard, then add some B vitamins. The feeling will go away somewhere in the vicinity of 1 to 15 minutes. Usually the water is enough, and within a minute, the hunger will be gone. And then wait for the feeling of hunger to return. And then eat a high protein, high fiber, healthy meal with good fats in it until you're satisfied, okay? It's, you know, fasting is healthful for everyone. And it used to be that everyone used to do that. But now we have grocery stores instead of, you know, hunting and gathering and having to weather out the storms. Health, you know, fasting is healthful for everyone, but if you're needing to gain weight, regular fasting is not recommended, as you can imagine. Instead, try to add 1 extra small meal or snack in each day, and then save your fasting for occasions, more rare occasions, but it is still healthful, and it can help you with bringing on better appetite. So for those that need to lose weight, the steps listed on the slide really work. Even before the pounds start falling off, you're going to feel much healthier. and will have a much better memory and a much improved mental outlook. You'll be happier. You'll be just like these happy people in this image here. I guarantee you're going to look and feel much lighter. So when you do sit down to your meal after you've fasted, eat the best and leave the rest. Whether you need to lose or gain weight, chew your food well and listen for the signal that you've had enough. And that means you've had enough. All right, if you're chewing your food well, at least, they say 50 times, but I find that 25 to 50, depending on what you're chewing, you chew your food. Make it a meditation, make it a mindfulness meditation. Taste the food. There's a concept. So, this saying, hunger is the sound of fat melting away, may not make perfect sense to you, but it's one of the affirmations I used when I lost 65 pounds off my little 5-foot tall frame. So I'm sharing it with those of you who want and need to lose weight like I did, to get through those few minutes of hunger each day to do that intermittent fasting. This worked for me, but I used 2 other affirmations that really got me to my weight goal. And guess what? I never went back. I met that goal and I've stayed there. Recently, I've run into quite a few people who've had a rough time achieving all sorts of goals in their lives. And I want to reach out to you. If you have a goal that has not been reached in your life, if you have interest in learning how to write your own affirmations, you know, and there's nothing like an affirmation that is designed for you. And no one can love you better than you love yourself. So when you write your affirmations, they will work for you. And so I want you to know that I'm going to be doing an affirmation workshop in the near future. I'm going to be teaching you exactly how I've achieved my dreams. And I'm going to ask you if you're interested in an affirmation workshop, just let us know. Send us a quick email. Just put, I want new affirmations, or I want affirmations in the subject line. Okay, so this is the health benefits of fasting as listed in the book Triumph Over Disease by Fasting and Natural Diet. It's written by Dr. Jack Goldstein. And he says, the fasting is giving your vital organs a complete rest. It's promoting the elimination of all the waste. It's allowing the body to adjust and to normalize. It's taking the weight off, basically, allowing you to produce the proper enzymes and secretions that it's supposed to produce. It lets the body break down and absorb swellings and weird kind of calcifications and deposits in your vessels and diseased tissues and abnormal growth. It helps you to get better. And it restores a youthful condition to the cells and tissues. I mean, all the research that's out there showing that you know, mild starvation, you know, limiting calories, decreased calories is very, very healthful and youthful. And it's going to permit the conservation and rerouting of energy. It clears and it strengthens your mind. And that's the thing, that last one, you're going to notice that. Your mind will get very, very clear with fasting. So Confucius said, by nature, men and women are nearly alike, but by practice, they get to be wide apart. So I hope you heard something today that will help you make a change and get yourself healthier, because that's my passion. So here is contact information if you have questions or individual issues. I'm going to go and open up the question answer, and let's see. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in. And I'm going to look at emails as well. Oh, I see. This is a great question, and that is, what if I'm using, I need to lose weight, and what if I'm using a probiotic that has some of the weight gain probiotics as well as the weight loss probiotics in it? Well, remember that it's all about diversity. So it's not that any one particular bacterium is a bad guy. That's not the truth. The truth is that they are, it's the diversity that we're looking for. We want as many diversity, as much diversity as is possible, okay? So what I'm gonna say is maybe using fermented foods like tempeh, kimchi, yogurt, fermented vegetables. There's all kinds of different foods that you can take on that have probiotics. We make Rejuvilac at home, kind of like a kombucha, where it's growing all kinds of bacteria. So wide variety of species, and I have wide variety species probiotics and prebiotics and a high fiber diet. So we are jumping through the hoops in my house to produce really, really great wide spectrum microbiota. And so I wouldn't worry so much about who you have as opposed to who you don't have, okay? Make sure that you have a wide variety of species. Okay, let's see. This is what may be happening if the biofilm turnover is not helping the leaky gut issues. So what may be happening, actually go ahead and write to me again, or I will, you're anonymous, so I cannot bring you on in the video. Go ahead and write to me and tell me what symptom it is that you're noticing. Hi, Scott. Scott's asking, is kombucha recommended for someone with caffeine sensitivity? If you have caffeine sensitivity, you can use a kombucha that doesn't have caffeine in it. So that's something that you can do at home, or make a Rejuvilac. In fact, I have some that's simmering on the counter right now that I made with pineapple. So it's just water and the outer surface of the pineapple. Well, the pineapple was lightly scrubbed with water, and then I popped all the skins and the core and the and such into water, and I will probably ferment that for I'm going to say 5 days, 6 days. You can go online and take a look at this. It has no caffeine in it, and it is delicious. And that's another thing that can be done. So you can make your own at home. It's not hard to make kombucha, and it doesn't have to have caffeine. Great question. So I'll try to answer the question about biofilm turnover. You know, what's happening is our biofilm turnover programs are changing very rapidly. And just in the preparation of this talk, I've run into some information that's going to be very, very helpful for a number of people. So if you're in the midst of a biofilm turnover and you're not sure and you have some symptoms that are not being taken care of, then I may be able to give you some suggestions right now. Yeah, yeast issues. Okay, the problem is yeast. Yeast loves to grow in an environment that is toxic. And oftentimes, to get rid of the fungi, we have to detox. And that becomes a little bit more complicated. And I have done quite a few talks on detoxification. We'll be doing more in the future. But it's nice if we know what the toxins are. And it's not something that can happen overnight. Getting rid of yeast is, it can be very tricky, especially when it's a really, really heavy growth. So that suggests that something else is going on, And one of the things that we can do is do environmental toxin testing, heavy metal testing, and even organic acid testing. So we can see which pathways are open and running really well and which pathways are not. And that will help us determine what to do to detox that person. But some chemicals come out of the body really, really quickly and easily, and some don't. Some, you know, I ran into, I'd say the classic story, and I may have told you this before, but the classic story is I had a client from Philadelphia, and she had yeast up one end and down the other. It's the mouth, under the breasts, under the armpits. She had it everywhere, in the nether regions, under the fingernails and such. And so we were doing, back then, we didn't have all the really cool enzymes that we have now that we can use for biofilm turnover. And, but she went on to a really strict diet, and, you know, just absolutely zero carbs, or almost no zero carbs. Vegetables were her only source of carbohydrate. No dairy, no fruit, no. There was no grain. And she got better, but still was fighting that yeast. So she had some kidney issues, and we started going after the kidney problems. And she called me up and she said, wow, this program that I'm on now is amazing for the yeast. I can even eat some organic corn chips now, and it doesn't cause me any problem. And it used to be that if she looked at anything with carbohydrate or sugar, she would break out. And she had terrible rosacea. It would just bloom and get really inflamed. So what the take home is that the detoxification helped her with her yeast. Yeast loves to grow in a toxic environment. And that is, you know, persistent yeast is something that we're seeing more and more of. Why? Because we're getting exposed to chemicals in our environment. We're getting exposed to chemicals. If you're in a big city, even if you're out in the country, it turns out that the farming communities sometimes have higher levels of chemicals than the city does now. So yes, it's a long-term issue, but it can be done. Let's see. More questions? I'm going to go back to emails. Let's see what we got here. No, I think we took care of that one. Oh, this is a great question. Someone's asking about whether fecal transplants are recommended. Now, to the best of my knowledge, fecal transplants officially are still illegal in this country. However, under the table, they are happening and they are working. And there are other countries that are doing fecal transplants. So just like those little mice where you know, you could take the poop from the skinny mouse and give it to a regular mouse and they become skinny, or you can give it to the obese mouse and they become skinny. Can people do that? And the answer is theoretically yes. The experience I have with clients is more so in the realm of inflammation and inflammatory gut problems. And in one case, it did have to do with inflammation in the gut of someone who was morbidly obese. And what happened was another family member donated the sample. A physician was willing to place that through a G-tube or an NG tube into the stomach of the person that was obese that had terrible, terrible inflammatory issues in their gut. And the effect was remarkable. So the inflammation was addressed almost overnight. Tremendous, tremendous relief. But you're gonna, right now, it's kind of at a difficult time because you're gonna have you might be hard pressed to find a practitioner that's willing to do it. So the laws have to catch up with the practices. And you can understand why there might be laws against that because it sounds really gross and might be. And I do recommend that if you do receive a fecal transplant from someone, it really ought to be a family member, because a family member is more likely to have the same family of bacteria that you do, or more similar bacteria. So you've already been sharing, whether you know it or not, you've been sharing. And so it's less of a change to your system. You're just adding back the bacteria that you need. And if it's a spouse that's happening another spouse, I recommend that you not be in the room when your loved one receives that. It's not good for your marriage. So anyway, wonderful questions. Oh my goodness. I would say, I think we have taken care of the questions that we needed to do. Oh, never mind. Here is a question. It is, what is C. diff and why is it so bad for you, and why am I hearing so much about it? Okay, great question. Oh my goodness. Clostridium difficile is C. diff, and it is a gram-negative bacterium that is anaerobe, which means it grows without, actually, can I say it's gram-negative? It kind of crosses a line in some ways, but it is a really nasty bacterium that is, it takes advantage of when there's a very low number of your good bacteria. So when the microbiome has been squashed by antibiotics, and you're basically kind of like one of those mice that had no bacteria in them after a wide spectrum antibiotic, what happens is C. diff can move in. And when C. diff moves in, it produces toxin that gets into the bloodstream and makes you very, very sick. It causes a lot of inflammation. It can cause bleeding in the gut. All of the tissues of the gut become highly inflamed, and the pain is outrageous. It can kill you. So that's why it's bad for you. You're hearing so much about it because so many people are getting it. It's very, very common because so many people are taking new antibiotics, and it seems to happen when somebody has had repeated exposure to antibiotics, okay? If you have repeated exposure to antibiotics, that is a problem. So let's see. Great question. Did I get to all of it? You're hearing so much about it because people are dying of it, and it's a major issue. So there are ways of dealing with C. diff. While C. difficile is usually treated with an even stronger antibiotic. But while you're taking that antibiotic, it's possible to put in, remember I talked about the flora or probiotics that set up the gut, so that kind of laying down the foundation for the biofilm. What we can do is, while the doctor is treating with the antibiotics, we start giving these bacteria, and it will start to set up the surface so that a new biofilm will grow. And then before you finish the antibiotics, you start taking a wide spectrum of the good guys. Actually, you can do it the whole time you're taking the antibiotics. Some of them will die, of course, but the antibiotic will actually work better if you're taking a wide spectrum probiotic at the same time. And that's been shown with research as well. So you take the colonizers and you take a wide spectrum probiotic, take your antibiotics, and then when the antibiotics are done, continue taking those probiotics. When you're repopulating the intestines, it's like, I mean, think about how big bacteria are. Microscopic, right? And we've got the surface the size of a tennis court to cover with them in multiple layers. How much does it take? A lot. It takes a lot. And if you are that inflamed with C. diff, you're going to have a really, really hard time taking in enough fiber to grow them up. So, but during the course of treatment, you can start to take in some really gentle prebiotics. And there's prebiotics that are really good exactly for doing that. And so we start feeding up the good bacteria, and maybe giving some cooling and soothing herbs for the gut to settle down some of that inflammation while you're growing a new biofilm. If you can do that during the antibiotics and definitely after the antibiotics, for at least bare minimum 3 months, what will happen is a new biofilm will grow. The bugs know what to do. They do it on their own. And your ability to digest food will change over that time. That was an awesome question. Thank you. Let's see. Well, I think we've done a good job. And thank you so much for your amazing questions. And until next time, we're going to be getting together next time to talk about how to successfully combat depression and anxiety. We're going to be taking care of our brain. Okay? Until next time, everyone. Bye-bye.